The name of my message is A Mother's Footprints. Today we are honoring women and mothers. So I see that Tylee and Taryn are here, so they can help me. So first of all, Tylee and Taryn, you want to come here for a minute? You want to be my helpers today and give every lady a Happy Mother's Day gift for me? So you can give your grandma and the other ladies. Just go ahead, each one of the ladies you see, not the men, they don't get them today. They got to wait another month. And then Sharon over here. One for free. There you go. And then Annette, right? Did I get it right? Annette. You need it.
And we need one for here.
Oh, two here. In the back row, right back there. And then a couple. There we go. Thank you, ladies.
I get you. I'm going to get this.
So my message actually is more my testimony, and it's called A Mother's Footprints because it's for you guys. I'm going to share with you the nuggets of things that I learned from not just my mother, but from other women in my life that impacted me greatly and are the reason who I am today. So I grew up as a pastor's kid. I lived in a very strong Christian home. My father almost didn't become a pastor. His mother was very strong in the faith. She went to church every day and played the church organ. But his father was the total opposite. His father was a very mean drunk. From stories I've been told, my father would hide himself in the home closet with a baseball bat or a knife to protect himself in case his father attacked him. He was the oldest of 5 siblings. And he said many times he came home afraid that he would find his mother dead. But his mother's faith in God made her so strong that she wouldn't even leave her husband, even though we're like, why didn't Grandma just leave him? But she wouldn't. She trusted in God the whole way. And she brought up her kids and went to church every single Sunday. And my dad told me there was a day that he was driving home and his mom looked at him and said, if it wasn't for you kids, I would kill myself. So he came from a mother who was very faithful to God and a father that didn't. In fact, my dad wanted to be a preacher at the age of 12. He loved the Lord with all of his heart. But because of his father, I was told as a teenager he was an angry young man. So much so that he had one dream, and that was to make an all-boys club called Boys Who Hate Their Fathers and Wish They Were Dead Club. And at the age of 17, my father decided he had it with my grandfather. He had made a choice. He was going to go home and kill his father. With weapon in hand, as he was going home, the Lord stopped him straight in his tracks. And God said, Raymond, if you do this, you will never serve me. And at that moment, my father decided to forgive his father. And instead of killing his father and becoming a murderer, my dad became a preacher. And a lot of it was on the faith of his mother, who stood strong and taught him how to stay strong no matter what he faced. So I grew up in a very good Christian home. I lived in Wapato, Washington. It was a little Indian reservation in the Yakima Valley. So whites were the minority. And our church wasn't very big because whites were the minority, and the Hispanics had their church, and the Indians had their church. So it was a small church, but I loved my church. I felt like everybody was my grandma and my grandpa. It was a very loving home. I never lacked for anything. We weren't rich. I admit we were poor, but I didn't realize how poor we were because of the love of my family and because of the love of our church. Our church was a lot like Paisley in some sense, except what we were close to Yakima, but it wasn't ranchers, it was orchard owners that we had a lot of in our congregation. So they like to do a knock and run. Someone would leave a crate of oranges at our back door at the parsonage and would knock and take off. We'd always laugh. Our church was small. We had one person that grew oranges, one person that grew pears, one that did apples, one that did cherries. So we'd laugh because of the fruit. We knew exactly who left the food. But I loved it. It was great. And I was the youngest of 4, so I have an older brother who's 6 years older than me, 2 older sisters, and then me. However, at the age of 9, my life changed. My father pulled me and my sister Carlina aside, who was only a year older than me, sat us on his lap with tears in his eyes, told us that my mom had 2 to 3 months to live. She was diagnosed with colon cancer and it was too far gone. I remember not understanding what was going on, and I remember it was kind of funny, Dad's crying, so I just giggled and jumped off his lap and ran off to play. My sister tells me she stayed, and she cried, but not because she understood what we were being told, but she cried out of sympathy for my father. Well, my mom lived past 2 or 3 months, which was a miracle, because 5 doctors had checked her, and all 5 doctors said, it's too far gone. There's no way she's going to live past a couple months. But she did. The next few years were ups and downs. We had our moments. There were good times and bad times. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer, my grandma, Ann, her mother, came to live with us. And my grandma was a huge part of our life. She was like the other mother, not grandmother, but the other mother. As the years went by, I think you'll have to excuse me, I don't know exactly the timelines, because I was a kid, but approximately 2 years after she was diagnosed, she had a bad case, again, was in the hospital. My father called us to the hospital, and one by one, he told each one of us kids to go in and say our goodbyes. This is what the Lord told me to do, so I'm doing it. Say our goodbyes, because she wouldn't make it through the night. I remember standing there in the hospital room at age 10 or 11, and I was staring at her chest because I couldn't tell if she was alive. And I could barely see it move. If I stared long enough, I could barely see it move. And I had all these thoughts going through my head, all this stuff that I wanted to say, but the only words that seemed to come out was, I love you, Mom. I love you. And then I remember looking up at my father, who was in the corner of the room with his back turned as if to give me some time to myself. And I remember saying, Dad, what are we going to do? And my dad said 3 of the most powerful words in the world. They weren't great biblical, quoted from the Bible scripture. They weren't something big and philosophical, but for a child, they were the best words I could ever hear, and they taught me a huge, huge lesson that have put an imprint on my life. My dad simply said, I don't know, hon. I don't know. And at that moment, as I stared at my big, strong, spiritual dad, I realized something. That even he was scared. Even he was angry and confused and frustrated. But the key thing was his actions in life. That in those words he showed me that even though I am not knowing what's going on, even though I'm confused and I'm angry and I'm scared, I'm going to keep trusting Jesus no matter what we face ahead. And it was the footprints of my parents that really guided me through life. A few months, about 5 months after, So just so you know, praise the Lord, she didn't die. Now you guys are all in tears, okay? Good part of the story, she made it through that night. I don't know if this part of my story lines up with that story, because I was told a lot later in life. But my dad said at one point he'd gotten a phone call from a pastor from a church he didn't even know at one of the times that my mom was having a real bad night. And he said, I just want you to know, I woke up in the middle of the night and I really felt this impression to pray for your wife, and I've been all night praying. And it was a pastor my dad had never even met before. Whether that coincides with that night, I don't know, but it was testimonies that we would hear about. So never not decide to pray when a name pops in your head. So time goes by, and at this time it was the summer of 1986. And me and my siblings every summer loved to go to my Aunt Arloa and Uncle Don's house. They lived out in Onalaska, Washington. So not Alaska, Onalaska. So it's like Paisley, maybe even, believe it or not, smaller. It's a speck of a place by Chehalis, Washington. They had a farm, they had cows, they didn't own a ranch, he was more like fireman, lumberjack kind of person, but they had cows. And here's the funny thing, we loved to learn to ride motorcycles through the fields. We built forts in their forest area and stuff, and they had salt licks. And us kids loved to go down and lick the salt licks. To us, it was like popsicles. And I can remember one day, even my cousins who lived there and whose cows, are right there in their backyard, we're all licking the cow lick. And then we're looking down and we see another cow lick and we realize what the salt lick. We realized what the salt lick was for. It was like an epiphany. As we saw a cow licking it. And we're all like, so anyways, story to be told. Cameron, if you ever lick them, at least chip off the piece and turn it around and lick it on the side the cows have licked it. That's what we learned to do that day. But I loved it at my aunt's house. That's where we went every summer. So this summer I was 11 years old and my birthday's August 18th. So this was in July that we went. And we were going to spend a few weeks with my aunt. My two older sisters were old enough to pick blueberries. The school bus would come at like 6 a.m. in the morning when it's freezing cold. Pick them up, they'd leave, pick blueberries, and then the bus would bring them back. Well, me and my cousin were not quite old enough to pick blueberries. You had to be 12, and I was 11, and I was a few weeks shy. So we ended up staying at home all day. And one morning, approximately about a week after we'd been with my aunt wakes us up early and she says, Rebecca, Julie, pack your sister's stuff, load it in the truck. It's time for us to go. So I remember we loaded up our stuff, loaded up the truck, we headed to the blueberry farm, picked up my sisters and my other cousin, and my aunt got their final paycheck and we loaded up in the back of her pickup. And I remember my sisters looking at me saying, and I was like, I don't know. But there was something inside all of us that knew it was the longest ride of my life. It was over Stevens Pass to Yakima Valley. I don't remember the hours, but not a word was said. We sat in the back of my aunt's pickup, and we just stared at the scenery as it went by. When we got to Wapato, we got to the house. It was empty except for my brother. It was quiet. It was eerily dark. All the curtains were shut. As we entered the front room, I could see the chair that my grandmother always sat in. I could see the chair my mom always sat, with the IV poles still there, but they weren't there. My sisters and my cousins ran downstairs to the basement where our bedrooms were. They started laughing and giggling back to childhood. But for some reason, I stayed upstairs with my aunt. And I remember the phone rang, and my brother answered the phone. And he just started to weep. And my aunt grabbed him. She said, Danny, I'm so sorry, Danny, I'm so sorry. Again, my sisters come running up with my cousins, and they're like, what's going on? And once again, I'm like, I don't know. Nobody's telling us, but yet we're all knowing. My aunt took us to the hospital, and we walked down the hall to my mom's room, and I remember thinking that even the hospital was eerily quiet. And there was a curtain closed to her room, so our aunt told us to stay outside of the room as she went in. And when she came out, she just told us to leave. And as we're walking down the hallway, I remember looking up at her, and I said, Aunt Arloa, well? She didn't answer. She didn't say a word. So quietly, we just walked. We got into the elevator. And when we were all by ourselves in the hospital elevator, my aunt looked at me and my sisters and said, Rebecca, what you asked? Yes. On August 1st, 1986, My mom had died of colon cancer. And on August 18th, I turned 12. My beautiful life had come crushing down. Everything had changed. And my questioning of God began. Because see, Tony, I had faith. In fact, my faith was so strong, I didn't even doubt that God would heal her. That's how strong my childlike faith was. But after she died, I accused myself in my heart of being the one that killed her, because I started to doubt that maybe my faith was as strong as I thought it was. I started to doubt that I prayed enough, that I fasted enough. I put a whole bunch of guilt on a child who didn't deserve that guilt. I know now that my faith was strong enough. That's why I was so mad. I never doubted it. It was what I was taught. Approximately 5 months later, a couple in our church decided my dad needed to go on a date. Thank you, people. So he set my dad up on a blind date with somebody he had never met before. It was a quick thing that happened, so I always clarify to people, he did not know her beforehand, okay? So 5 months, they have a blind date. They ended up dating, and then September 13th, 1987, my dad married my stepmom. So a year after, just so nobody has any judgments, my dad's a godly man, and I believe she was an angel sent from heaven for a family that needed someone, even if at the time we did not know it or believe it. So if you are a step family member, God can use you. And if there's a lot of frustration with that, it takes time and trusting Him. But my stepmom is an amazing person. And then after that, I won't say things were easy. She joined a family with 4 teenagers. I was 13, my brother was 19. He had graduated and was heading off to the Marines. So my 2 sisters between, they fought a lot, and they fought a lot with my stepmom. There was a lot of fighting. We were that church family. Remember, my dad's still a pastor. We had moved away from the church we had been at because it was too difficult for my dad to be married to a new woman, and the congregation we had been with so long to kind of accept her. So we ended up having to move to a different church. But I say that to say we were the church family that, would have a fight in the parsonage the morning of, because us girls are yelling and screaming and back-talking my stepmom, and then we'd walk with a smile on our face into the church building as if nothing had ever happened. So even pastors are not perfect. As time went on, I went to Seattle Bible College. I graduated high school at 17 in 1992. Went to Seattle Bible College. And that is where I went for 4 years, met Pastor Earl, got married, and so forth. And for those that don't know, we have 5 beautiful children that are grown. But in that story, there are some key things that I was taught because of the foundational faith of family members. So the first thing nugget I want to share with you guys is the whole reason I'm even a children's pastor. My mother was the epitome in my mind as a kid of a children's director. It was a small church, so my dad was the lead pastor. My mom was always, whatever else needed to be done, she was it, which included children's church leader. She led missionettes and all. And we had our times that she couldn't, and we'd be out in the adult service, but when she was doing well, we would. My mom was so good at children's church, so good, Jackie, that other churches wanted my mom to go tell their church and their children a story. So whenever we'd visit other churches, they would say, hey, we want the kids to come forward, and we have a special person that's going to come, and she's going to tell a story. But they would leave the adults in the room because my mom was so good at it. My mom made learning about Jesus fun, even for a child. And so after she died, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be like her. And at the age of 12 was when I made the decision. I didn't know what type of ministry, but I knew I was going to be in ministry. And so bear with me as we do something a little bit different. Nope, that was not a bug. I'm going to share with you guys something. So, Tylee and Taryn, you want to come sit to the front seat? I would like, in honor of my mother, to share with you guys one of my favorite stories my mom would tell. When sometimes we would visit other churches and even kids' church. This here is called the storyboard. Okay, it was back in the day before we had that. So people had to use other ways to show the children the pictures. And my mom loved to tell stories from a series from the Dr. Fables. It was a missionary from Africa who took African animals, made stories out of them with biblical truths or biblical values to them. So we're going to just step back for a moment. You're going to pretend you're children, and I'm going to take you back to what my childhood in children's church might have looked like. So this is the story of Nazca. Nazca was a snake that lived in Africa, and he lived nearby the Preem Bee tribe with his wife. And in the Preem Bee tribe was a little boy. His father was a great, great hunter. But this little boy, he had a chicken. And this chicken's name was Cookie. And do you know what? Every morning when Cookie would cluck, she would lay an egg. Sure enough, there was an egg. Do you know what snakes like to eat? They like to eat eggs. Well, pretty soon Nazca started to realize that every time Cookie laid an egg, in the morning, he would have some breakfast. So he waited for the next morning, Nazca did, and sure enough, Cookie clucked. She clucked like she always clucked. Long came Nazca, slithered through that little hole in the barn, swallowed up that egg. Tasted so good. Then he turned around to go out that little hole in the wall. Hold on, he's stuck. Yolk break. Oh, yolk went down his tummy, egg broke. It tasted so good. Then he'd go home, curl up into a little nap. His wife would come along and say, Nazca, Nazca, where have you been and what have you been doing? But he would just look at her and say, hush. Well, pretty soon, this little boy started to realize that every time Cookie clucked, there were no eggs. So he ran to his father and his Dad, Cookie's clucking. There's no eggs. So his dad, being the great hunter, he told him, I have an idea. Tomorrow morning you wake up really early and you hide in the barn and you wait and you see what happens. So sure enough, the boy hid in the barn. He watched. He waited. And Cookie clucked. She clucked like she always clucked. Long came Nazca through the hole in the wall, swallowed up that egg, turned around to go out the little hole in the wall. Wait, he's stuck. Slithered on home for a nap. So the boy ran back to his dad and he's like, Dad, there is a snake still in my eggs. So the dad, being a wise hunter, said, I have an idea. So he told the boy to boil an egg. What happens to an egg when you boil it? Very good. It gets really hard. And he told the boy, tomorrow morning, you wait. When Cookie clucks, you quickly switch the soft egg with your hard egg. So that's what the boy did. The next morning, he went and hid in the barn. And then Cookie clucked. She clucked like she always clucked. And the boy quickly switched the eggs, and in came Nazca. Right through the hole and all smug in his breakfast, swallowed it down. Tasted so good. Then he goes out the little hole in the wall, and he gets stuck again, so he's got, oh, we lost it, that's okay. He got stuck again, so he's, hold on. And it's not breaking because it's hard. And so you know what happened? It's down here on the floor, that's what happened. I gotta find the right picture, but I don't know if I should tell you girls the end of the story. Because your mom might be mad at me. Do you want to know what happened to Naska? You sure you want to know? Yeah. Okay, we'll get there eventually, because I guess it happens to be like the last one that's on the floor. So he got stuck. He couldn't get out. And the boy was able to catch Naska. And he died. A moment of silence. Okay, moment's over. All right, so Karen, or Titan, do you know something maybe we can learn from Naska? What's a lesson we can learn from Naska? Never mess with snakes. Well, you know what? Here's a good lesson we can learn. That's a good one. You don't want to mess with snakes. But the Bible tells us, be sure your sins will find you out. See, Naska thought nobody was watching and nobody could see, but he got caught. And in the same way, when we think nobody's watching, God sees everything. I was given this storyboard. You can go sit by your grandma. Thank you, girls. I was given this storyboard by my family. It was the only one we found of my real moms. And they gave it to me since I was working in children's ministry, and then Pastor Earl had it laminated to keep them safe and longer, and even has my mom's handwriting of notes for the story. So that is an example of a footprint that my mom put on my life in my short 11 years. That is who I am today because of her. The other thing, a second thing that I learned from my parents was when my dad was going to marry my stepmom, I dealt with a lot of emotions. And the main one being betrayal. Somehow, if you accept a new woman in your life, you are betraying your own mother. And nobody told me that, it's just what I felt. I knew my sisters didn't like her. I mean, we talked about it. We'd make fun of the way she looked. We found anything to tear her down, because in today's society, step-parents are evil. It's in all the Disney movies. They're evil, okay? So you just naturally think that. But I remember struggling with it, because in my heart, I wanted to accept her, but then I might be betraying my real mom, and then my sisters, you know, they would be mad if I had all accepted her and all. So I can remember just a few days before my dad's wedding that I was 13, and I had a teddy bear that my real mother had given me, and I put her perfume on it. She wore Taboo, kind of an older smell, and she had powder perfume that she would put, and I put it all over my teddy bear, and that would help me go to sleep at night. And on this particular night, I was holding tight to that teddy bear, and I was bawling. And I was I can't describe the amount of anguish I was in, because I didn't want this new woman, because she was like betraying my mother. We'd be forgetting about my mother. She would be erased. And now we're going to move on with life with this new person in our life. And in the middle of that anguish, in a child's mind, I was hearing all my own thoughts, but I heard God clearly. I know without a shadow of a doubt, I heard God. And it wasn't a loud, audible voice, but it was God. Because in the middle of my anguish, there was a thought that interrupted. And that thought was so loud and clear, and it wasn't my own thought. And I heard, Rebecca, if your real mom was alive, what would she want you to do? Instantly, I knew the answer. Jackie, I didn't have to think about it. My mom was so strong in her faith that instantly I knew she would want me to accept this woman and love her like my mother. So that night, I made a choice. I made a decision that I was going to follow my mom's footprints. I was going to follow her example of being like Christ. And I was going to love my stepmom and make that choice no matter what others around me said or did. And to this day, I have an awesome relationship with my stepmother. I can remember on the day my parents got married. So keep in mind, I was the youngest of 4. My siblings tell you this is not true, so I'm going based off my own emotions. But I could swear, I thought they would hate me if they knew that I was going to accept our new mom. So I can remember as they were getting into their car to drive off to their honeymoon, my siblings all standing behind, waiting for them to drive off. And like a little giddy girl, I had to walk up to my stepmom, and I was like, give her a hug, and like, bye, Mom. But I made sure to whisper it because I thought if my siblings heard, I'd be dead. But because of my mom, what she taught me at a young age, I knew that's what she wanted me to do. Another thing I learned was when I was in Bible college, I had gone through what I would consider my true salvation. It was I didn't know a lot of the emotions I kept inside because I grew up in a godly home and I was taught to trust Jesus no matter what. So I wanted to be that very spiritual, faithful young lady. I remember being in Bible college and I was 19 and one of my friends came to me and he said, Rebecca, you're mad at God. And I was like, no, I'm not. And he's like, yeah, you are. And I was like, no, I'm not. Well, I walked away, Cameron, and for 2 weeks, I could not get that out of my head. And all I could think about was, don't you go to hell if you're angry with God. I mean, like, there is no in-between, dude. It is straight to hell if you're angry at God. Especially my anger. Because, see, God owed me an apology because he took my mother. But then again, you can't forgive God. I mean, he's God. He never does anything wrong, right? And he doesn't owe me an apology. He's God. But it's what I struggled with, and I realized I was angry with God, and I expected an apology, and I needed to forgive him. But again, it goes straight to hell. So for 2 weeks, I agonized over this. And I would even try to find my own secret places so I could have it out with God. But every time I found a secret place, I was always worried that maybe somebody will hear me. And then, I, being the godly woman that I am, would be a very bad witness. And so, or I might say something I regret to God and go straight to hell. So, I never did until a couple weeks after my friend had told me that. And it was every Tuesday, Thursday, we had chapel. And I remember I don't remember what chapel was about, I have no clue. But the dean decided that before we were to go to our classes, we were to spend some time alone with God in prayer. He told everyone, go find your own spot. I don't care. I'll open up the classrooms. You can go in the classrooms. You can go to the library. Find a place of your own, and we're just going to spend some time, just you and God. So I finally decided, I've got it. This is bothering me. I got to just get rid of it. I got to finally have it out with God. So I go to every classroom, Cameron, and guess what? There's people praying in every classroom. I even go to the library. People praying. And some of them loudly in the library. I even went to the bathroom, Betty, to the girls' bathroom. 2 women praying in the bathroom. I'm like, God, I don't want to do this in front of people because I might go straight to hell and it'll be a bad witness. So finally, there's one place in the entire school that was empty. The dean's office. And I remember standing as I looked into his office and looked up and down the halls. I thought, wow, I know he's not in here. So I went into his office and I fell on the floor. And still, something kept me from having that conversation with God. And then at one moment, I remember feeling a presence behind me. And I just knew it was the dean. I don't know what he was thinking or what, but I could just feel that he was standing behind me. And I simply said, is it okay to yell at God? And he said, yes. and something broke. And I yelled at God, good. I yelled, I hate you, God, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And it was loud. And it went on, and at one point I realized, I don't hate you, God. I just don't understand why. I just don't understand. I remember as I was yelling, I hate you, at one point I wanted to stop praying because I loved God. Really, I did. I just was confused. And I remember at one point thinking, this isn't even my own voice screaming. So as I'm screaming, I hate you, and my thoughts are like, no, God, it's not true. I don't really hate you. At one point, I somehow calmed myself down, and I said, I hate you. It was just like, why, God? Why? 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 And after a little bit, again, I felt the presence next to me. I don't know when she got there, but the dean's wife was knelt on the ground with me with her arm around me. And she said something that, again, was something that a woman said to me that changed my life forever. And in that small Bible college, she was like a mother away from home for me. She said, Rebecca, it's not the question why, it's the question what. And I remember thinking, are you going to explain that for me? But I didn't want to ask because I was in Bible college. We're supposed to be really smart, okay? So I didn't want to ask and look stupid, but it sounded really philosophical and really good. But honestly, at the moment, no clue what it meant. So for the next 2 weeks, I fasted and I prayed. I said, God, give me the answer. What does that mean? When I discovered the answer, that was my true salvation story. See, it's not the question, why? Because no matter what the answer is, you'll never have a satisfied answer. If God was able to come stand in front of me and tell me, Rebecca, this is why I didn't heal your mother, still wouldn't be good enough because I'd be like, okay, all right, fine. Well, why didn't you even give her cancer to begin with? Right? He's God. So I had all these things to loop around with every answer he would give me. There was no answer that would satisfy unless God was able to go back to the past and have it never happen. So it's not the question why, because you will never get a satisfied answer. But it's the question, what? What are you going to do? Are you going to spend your life angry with God and desert him? Or are you going to follow him and trust him no matter what? And again, I was pulled back to my real mother. I was pulled back to my father's faith, to my grandmother's faith, to my stepmom's faith. And I made a decision. I said, you know what? I'm going to follow their footprints that are following me to Christ. And I made a decision that my what would be to still serve the Lord and trust him no matter what. And then there's the final thing I want to share with you guys that I learned. I learned a lot more, but we got to condense it. You know, I'm 50 years old, there's a lot to learn. Remember I told you at one point I came to my mom's bed, and the only words that came out of my mouth were, I love you. But I had a whole bunch of other thoughts in my head. When she passed, I had a lot of regrets. I was just a kid. Even kids have regrets. All of a sudden, I regretted the times that she needed her back rubbed, because with cancer, there's a lot of moaning and groaning with back pains and all. And this was back in the day when the TV was smaller. It wasn't as big, huge, and sharp. And so I remember one time my mom wanted me to scoot a little feet back, and for some reason out of my sisters and I, she chose me to rub her back. We were watching Chips. Okay, ladies, who remembers Chips? Okay, they were cute, in case you forgot. Okay, I don't know if you remember this show. They were cute cops on motorcycles. Okay, in the 80s, and you know, that was the show. And so me and my sisters loved that show, our favorite show. And it wasn't like you could DVR it. And so I remember my mom asking me to scoot 2 feet further away from the TV. So I did. And I grumbled, and I griped, and I complained. because now I'm not as close to the TV as I'd like to be. So what she did, she said, fine, Rebecca, just go watch your TV. I regretted that. You know why? Because as a kid, ready, Dad? As a kid, people tell you, she's healed, she's no longer in pain. As a child, you know what I'm thinking? I killed her. Because I didn't bother to take away the pain. So those were guilt and feelings that I dealt with that I would regret. And so I would find myself at her stone in the graveyard just telling her all the things that I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry for the time I stole the cookie in the cookie jar and I lied about it. But on the flip side, I also had a lot of regrets of things that were positive that I never said. See, I didn't just want to say I love you. I wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I'm so thankful that you're my mother. I'm so thankful you're part of my life. I admire you. And this is my favorite thing about you. I know my best memories are when you would tell stories in kids' church. And my best memories are this and that, and all this stuff I wanted to tell. But she wasn't there. So I remember talking to God, and I'd have my conversations with God as a kid, and I would say, God, I was wondering, I don't know how it works when somebody dies, but can you part the clouds so Mom can come down and just listen? I have some things I want to tell her. And then I was like, but then again, God, maybe that's not how it works. Maybe you can't part the clouds when you're in heaven. I don't know. So instead, can you grab out the heavenly video camera? This is literally what I thought, people, okay? Grab out the heavenly video camera, video me talking to my mom, and then play it in the heavenly VHS player. And then I was like, but then again, God, I don't know if they got that in heaven. So God, maybe you could just sit there and I talk to you, God, like you're my mom, and then you give her the message for me. That was so ingrained in me that at a young age, Cameron, I wrote a letter to all my aunts, to all my uncles, to my father, to my grandmother, to my brother in the Marines, and I said all those positive things nobody wants to say. I told them how proud I was of them, how much I loved them, all the things I was thankful for. And I told them all the good things that I held close and dear, the memories that I had. Because I didn't want any more regrets. And as a kid, when your mom passes away, every time the phone rang, I thought it was somebody dying. I had a long time I couldn't even step into a hospital. And I can remember my grandma passed away around 2001 or 2, and I was married by then, had 3 kids. And I knew I had said everything to my grandmother I ever needed to say. But when she was in the hospital, the doctors weren't allowing. We had a large family on my real mom's side, very large family. And nobody was allowed in the room. My aunts pulled me and my sisters aside and they told us, girls, we know that out of everybody here, you understand. So we've asked the doctors to let you have one last chance to talk to her. So I got my last chance with my grandmother. Me and my sisters, one by one, we went in the room. And the stuff that I never said to my mom on the bedside, I said to my grandmother. Even though in my head I was fighting with it, because I didn't want to give her permission to die. And sometimes you're afraid to say things because you feel like it's giving them permission to die, but I did. One of the hardest things I said to her, see, my grandmother promised my real mother that she would take care of us kids. And my grandmother always did, even after she moved. When my dad got married to my stepmom, she moved out of the house. Even then, she still took care of us. So I remember looking at her in that bed and fighting with God because I don't want her to have permission to die. I don't want to give up that he can't heal her. But I knew I needed to say what needed to be said. And one of those things was, when you get to heaven, you tell Mom, you did an amazing job. When my father died in 2021, I knew I said everything I needed to say to have peace. Why? Because my mother had put an imprint on my life of what it was like to follow Christ. And even after she was dead and gone, there were so many things that I still embraced. So many things I still learned from the imprint she gave in my life. So the main thing I want you guys to learn from this is it's Mother's Day. And it's not just the day to go home and tell your wife or your mother that you love them. It's the time to have that conversation, to say, hey, you know what, here's some really good memories I have. And you know what, Mom, I'm proud of you, and I'm thankful for you. I see how hard you work. I don't know why, but for some reason, it's easy for us to put each other down. It doesn't take courage to be mean. It doesn't take courage not to make a phone call. But why does it take courage to say something nice? Why does it feel awkward to say those deep, loving things? So today I'd encourage you to do that. And maybe there's someone in your life that you're like, you know, we don't even get along. Don't have regrets. Because there'll come a day when all you have to talk to is a stove. And those regrets will haunt you. I had nightmares as a child because of the lack of rubbing my mom's back a couple times. I would have nightmares because I blamed myself. Don't have regrets. Say the things that take courage to say. And I know that usually Earl ends this time in a song, but I'm going to quote a couple scriptures, and then I'm going to sing a song that, bear with me, there's no music or anything to it. When I was a teenager, part of my going through the mourning process was I wrote a song for my mother. And then I had a friend that helped me put music to it. And it's always been something that has helped me on Mother's Day in different times. Because even if you lose someone, you know, 37 years ago, it still can hurt 50 years later or so. For the rest of your life, there'll always be that certain emptiness. And so this was a way that comforted me. But before I sing it, Proverbs 22:6 says, start your children off in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not turn from it. I know oftentimes we struggle because not all of our children are following the Lord, not even Pastor Earl and I. And it's a struggle because we wonder where we went wrong. But we lean on the promise of God. You start your children off in the right spot, and when they're old, they will not flee from it. And I actually thought to myself, you can almost change it to start your children off in the way they should go, and when you are gone, they will not turn from it. I followed my parents' footprints and they led me to Christ. The question for you today is, where are your footprints going to be when you're gone? There is a man who wrote a book called Final Quest, Rick Joyner. It was a vision that he had had. And a key part of this vision actually really stuck to me. He wrote books on it. And at one point, he's in the throne room of God. And there isn't just God's throne. There's many, many thrones around him in heaven. And this is one thing he wrote. I looked at the thrones. I looked at those who were now seated. I could recognize some of the great heroes of the faith. But most of those seated, I knew, had not even been well known on earth. Many I knew had been missionaries who had expended their lives in obscurity. They had never cared to be remembered on earth, but only to him. I was a bit surprised to see some who had been wealthy and rulers who had been faithful with what they had been given. However, it seemed that faithful, praying women and mothers occupied more thrones than any other single group. You can make a huge footprint. I was told when after my mom died, so many people told me, your mom prayed every night for you kids. Every night she prayed for you. She even prayed for your spouses. So when I married Pastor Earl, I'm like, dude, my mom covered you in prayer. You're good. She covered you in prayer so many years ago. The footprint of not just a mother, a father, a man, a woman. Your footprint, even as a teenager, can lead people to Christ and make an imprint. The song is called Take a Message to Mother. And I want you just to think about one person, woman, man, child, friend, stranger, I don't know, somebody that God's telling you right now, you need to say those things that take courage, those words that take courage, or you're going to have regrets. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Mommy was a good soul, always praying for her children, day and night. She would kneel at her bedside and cry to God, keep my children under your wing when I am gone. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. And every day, in every way, let them know we love them. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Show them how to fly in the narrow way, and teach them to do what you say, so that someday we see each other. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Dear God, take a message to Mommy for me. Tell her I'll soon be there. Tell her I'll soon be there. Tell her I'll soon be there. I'm so thankful for the footprints that I got to follow, because the footprints I followed led me to Christ. It just comes down to, where will our footprints lead? What will be our legacy?